Well, the misery is finally over for England, at least for now. Australia doing the inevitable, taking those final four wickets to go 3-0 up and retain the Ashes in 11 days. It's a result where, the following morning when you wake up, depending on where you are in the world, it's just stats and numbers rolling in front of your eyes about just, how quickly this Ashes series has been decided. All the good things Australia have done, all the bad things England have done, and how it's all kind of culminated in this abysmal performance from England, but an exceptional professional performance from Australia. And let's make one thing very clear: going into the series, there was obviously so much chat, so much hyping up and overhyping and hyperbole, in my opinion, about sort of what this series could potentially be from an England perspective. Obviously, the Bazball narrative was the thing that was driving a lot of this conversation, and a lot of the chat. Just every time I would see a headline, each day, it would just sort of make me cringe, because I felt like too many people were sort of getting caught up in what Bazball was and what it was kind of being made out to be in tougher conditions. And if those of us who are able to keep a level head and try and look at things a little bit more kind of logically and with a healthy dose of realism, I think we all felt that it was going to be really tough for England to win consecutive test matches. I was one of those people that felt like they could potentially win at least one. The way that first test went, it kind of suggested that maybe that was the case until that last session on day two. But all the chat was also about Australia being too old, not the team they once were. Various tags about how bad this Australian team was or has become. And I think one thing has been very apparent to me at the end of this third test, and that is this Australian side are still world beaters. They are still, it's probably 8 or 9 of the 11 are the same players that were there at the World Test final in June against South Africa this year. A lot of them were part of the 2023 World Test Championship winning squad. It's the same, largely the same 11 that has conquered and dominated Test cricket home and away in various kind of tough conditions and situations over the last 4 years. So from my point of view, I couldn't really understand why there was so much negativity being directed toward this Australian side. And once again, they've proven that they just quietly will and methodically dismantle opposition that aren't on the money in when it comes to doing the basics well and being disciplined, and that's exactly what has come to pass in the series so far. And Australia are 100% deserved winners of the series. They've been better, they've been stronger, they've been smarter, they've been tactically more astute. All the possible kind of categories that you have to fulfill for to be successful. Australia have done it, and they've just proven it again and again, and this was no exception. So Australia deserved winners. England, I mean, it's there's going to be so much post-mortem between this test and the Boxing Day test, but obviously at the end of the series. And it's again that feeling of, why has it taken England so long to show glimpses of a refined game that could potentially compete or could have competed in this series? It's 3 tests in, day 5, and probably England have played their best 2 days of cricket on this tour on these last 2 days. And that's just too late. And for all the kind of comments that are coming out of from Ben Stokes, from the coaches, and even just online from fans, there needs to be a period of honest reflection, and accept the reality of what has happened, and the reality of what this team is capable of at the moment. This result does not mean that this is how they will play all the time moving forward. Of course not. Anyone can adapt and change and improve. But as I say, coming into this series, you look at what this England side were embodying in terms of their approach. It was a very one-dimensional form of cricket. It was a brand of Test cricket that relied more on sort of chaos and these sudden transient moments of brilliance, and almost needing to be pushed into a corner to thrive, as opposed to doing what has always worked in Test cricket, which is doing the basics well day in, day out, and coming to Australia, which is always a hard place to tour, when you're on point, but especially if you're kind of stubborn in sticking to certain kind of dogmas in your approach. The feeling from my end was it was always going to be a challenge for this side, and I think we've seen that. And for England, it's I don't know why it's taken them 3 tests to figure this out. We'll have to see what happens at Boxing Day and in the Sydney Test, but this, I think, has been the wake up call that this whole management, this whole setup needed, because even as each test was passing, and each day, at the end of each day's play, it almost felt like they were still kind of living in their own bubble, believing their own hype still about what could still be possible come the next morning, where they could pull things back in a dramatic way. And it was kind of blowing my mind that that was the narrative. Those were the narratives that were still being kind of written and spoken from, I guess, the think tank and the higher ups in the setup. And again, it was another case of where you have to have realism in terms of what it is you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it. You can't have these kind of wild dreams that are underpinning your potential strategy for success, because in Test cricket, over 5 days, 3 tests, 5 tests, the reality of who is the better side, it does come to the surface. You can't get away with these as I say, these kind of like flash in the pan performances. It has to be that regimented, methodical approach that wins. In white ball cricket, sometimes you can get away with playing a flashy way for long periods because it's a condensed format. Things can happen, and in terms of batting, things are slightly more in favor of the batters. But in Test cricket, where the ball does so much more, pitches play so much more of a role in terms of which team comes out on top, which batters have success. You can't come into it with just this one way of playing and expect it to do well. So, from my point of view, this result is not a surprise if you're willing to kind of look at the situation objectively, look at the team's strengths and weaknesses objectively, and kind of go from there. Starting the day, England needed 228 of 90 overs, and I mentioned yesterday that the inevitable thing was Australia. They were going to take the 4 wickets because their bowling attack is it's too good, and it's with 6 wickets down, and the baggage that's with this England side at the moment. You just felt like Australia were going to do it, but mathematically and kind of logically, there was still a way for England to chase this down, especially given they were starting the day with 2 frontline batters who got through yesterday unscathed, and they actually got off to a really good start. Jamie Smith, who's had a really quiet series with the bat this so far in the first 2 tests, he showed what we've seen so often from him at home in England, down the order. He really kind of took the game to Australia, to the bowlers, including against the new ball, which at that stage as an England fan, with the runs kind of ticking off quickly, he went from 228 needed to less than 200 to 150. The rate they were scoring, and the pitch still looking really good for batting. It elicited those kind of feelings of, oh, maybe could this be it? Could this be another great fourth innings run chase? And and Will Jacks was kind of supporting him in a really kind of grounded way. He wasn't throwing the bat unnecessarily. So that partnership was kind of developing really, really nicely. And given the fact that this test we had seen the batters, or at least some of them, adopt a slightly different approach and not necessarily continue to throw the bat at the ball, you felt like, maybe if they play it right, they have the time to play with 90 overs. The run rate was the required run rate is probably like 2, 3 and over, something less, around that 2 and over. It was possible, but even in the dying moments when there was the slimmest of slim chances, you again saw those old habits coming back to kind of bite them in the behind. And Jamie Smith hitting Stark for 2 fours already in the over, and also just all the boundaries that he had hit up until that point, and the start that he got England off to this morning. You were just hoping that he wouldn't get carried away and go again, and that's exactly what he did. He tried to manufacture a third consecutive boundary, if I'm remembering correctly, off a ball that wasn't there to be hit in that way. And maybe he was trying to hit it too hard as well. I don't know, but it was again that same kind of shot we've seen from the first test onwards that brought Australia back into the game. And just from Mitchell Stark's celebration, you could see that Jamie Smith had slightly kind of shaken Australia a little bit. I wasn't expecting the runs to flow so smoothly in the morning, and the way he was hitting Stark and Cummins, it looked like that Australia was slightly on the back foot just for that first hour or so. So Jamie Smith giving away his wicket just, again, it knocks the wind out of your sails, and it makes you think, here we go again. And what made it more frustrating was that, Nathan Lyon has sustained what looks to be a series-ending injury with his hamstring. It's his second, what looks to be a serious injury in the last couple of years. Obviously, in the 2023 Ashes at Lords, he tore his calf, I think, and he was ruled out of that series. Again, it was similar scenes with him hobbling on crutches, and with Nathan Lyon, who had such an influence on this game with the ball and with the pitch beginning to spin, and with his accuracy as a spinner, there was again an opening there for England if they played it right to take advantage of that injury, because the runs had been flowing. Australia now were 1 bowler down with Nathan Lyon going off. So England, there were a few things England could have achieved. One was play it a little bit smarter and recognize that they've lost one of their frontline bowlers. Let's get some overs into the legs of the other pace bowlers who would have to maybe cover for him a little bit. Travis Head obviously would have to bowl more overs, and Travis Head is a good part-time off spinner, but he's not a Nathan Lyon. And Jamie Smith had showed signs yesterday and even a little bit this morning of attacking him with success. So they could have really capitalized on Travis Head a little bit more, but also getting the more overs into the Australian bowlers' legs, especially someone like Pat Cummins, who was coming back from a back injury. He was probably, not wanting to bowl too much unless he absolutely had to. And, that was just an area where they could have really capitalized and drawn things out. But I guess the thing with this batting team and this whole setup is it's almost like they don't want to take things to the final hour, even if that means giving themselves a very realistic chance of winning. It seems like, they either want to get it done, in the first session or two, or just be bowled out quickly and just try and start again come the next test. And this is the big thing that has affected Bazball's chances of really being competitive all around the world and in all situations. They almost rule out some of these smarter options, when it's presented to them. And I don't really know why. We saw a similar instance of this in the England summer this year at Edgbaston on that last day, where Jamie Smith and Chris Wokes had a chance to play out the day for a draw, and they had actually done a lot of good work for the first I think session or session and a half, and things were looking really good. And then all of a sudden, they started playing shots out of nowhere, threw away their wickets, and in the end, England just fell very quickly to being all out. And they, I think, coming into that test, they were 1-0 up from the Headingley test, and basically just let India back in the series when they had a chance to draw the game. And today had the similar kind of energy to it for me, where they had a chance to be smart about it. And I'm not saying they should have drawn the game. They actually had a realistic chance of winning, given how quickly they were scoring the runs, and with Nathan Lyon being ruled out. So it's just another instance where even when you think that they've learned some lessons, they still seem to revert back to those old habits. And that's been one of the biggest reasons why they find themselves at the wrong end of the scoreline. If there was one thing this game showed really clearly, it was that experience and just keeping a level head, and as I mentioned before, that having realism in terms of your game plans will always trump the sort of excitable, eccentric, blueprints you might come into, or the wild dreams that you might have sort of conjured up to sort of get everyone's spirits up. And Pat Cummins in the press conference kind of alluded to the fact that a lot of the chat before the series was how much older this Australian side was compared with England's, and that might work against them and so on. But Pat Cummins sort of spun it as to say, well, the age just means that it's experience. It's something that works in our favor. All the guys in the side have been in various situations on various pitches against various opposition. They kind of have a good idea as to what to do to get out of certain tricky situations, or how to hammer home the advantage when they do find themselves on top. And I think that's what's happened in this game in particular. And again, it shocked me how much kind of negativity and sort of garbage criticism is kind of being leveled at this Australian side. It's not like this is a side that has been losing a lot, and it is legitimately not the side they were 4 years ago. They're a side that still find ways of winning, even if they might not be legends from 1 to 11. They're still, along with probably South Africa at the moment, the two best test teams in the world, because of the fact that they play the situation well. Their players just play smarter a lot of the time. And Pat Cummins proved that kind of emphatically, and hopefully that silenced a lot of the detractors. I'm not, I might sound as though I'm sort of like an Australian sympathizer. It's not so much that. I just like to look at the teams in Test cricket objectively, and just look at how certain players or certain teams have done over a long period of time, where they've done it, in what situations, and then kind of make my judgments based on that. And as I say, this Australian side have done a lot of good things over the last 4 years, and for them to have received so much kind of unwarranted criticism and accusations about certain things, it just seemed really, really strange to me. So Australia kind of silenced that in such a professional way. For England, it's almost like the opposite. They kind of live in sort of an echo chamber, where it's only their voice that they hear and their takes. You get the feeling they don't always look at the opposition and look at what they've done well. Obviously you can't control what the opposition does, and in a series you can only really control things within your own bubble. So I understand that from a team perspective. But throughout these 3 tests, Australia have done certain things day in, day out which has worked, and England tend to sort of try that for a little bit and then go to something that clearly doesn't work, and then they try to find ways almost to justify that, it seems. And it's just another case of why this this England side is being held back in terms of success, in a wider range of conditions and situations, because that one-dimensional approach, both in thinking but also technical, just what they actually execute on the field, it's really hampering this team's progression after that initial good start, which I still largely put down to a shock factor in terms of what they did to some of the teams in those first kind of 6 months. I think now, with 3-4 years passing, that reality is probably hitting them, the fans, and all of us kind of watching Test cricket. If you watch kind of Test cricket across the board, you're kind of seeing where exactly the strengths are and where the deficiencies are, and they have a lot of introspection to do. One of the big themes throughout this tour, and it's kind of been funny at some points to listen to what's said and some of the social media reaction, but also it makes you wonder what is actually the optimal thing to do on a tour like this, and that's been the topic of preparation from England's point of view. I think after the Gabba test, Brendan McCullum said that he maybe felt like the team overprepared and maybe did too much in the lead up to that game. But then after today's game, with the Ashes gone, it sounded like he kind of was admitting that maybe the preparation was was suboptimal, and it was maybe it wasn't the right preparation, maybe it wasn't enough preparation, and so on. And again, I've never played Test cricket. I haven't gone on international tours. I haven't toured Australia. I don't really know what sets you up as a touring side for success. I think I mentioned in one of my earlier videos that previous England sides have toured Australia in the last 15 years, done all the kind of done things, the conventional things that you would expect sides to do, where they come a little bit early, play some tour games, and then go into a series, and they still ended up, losing 5-0 or 4-0. So this England side, it felt like, given they like to do everything a bit differently, they tried to even approach the preparation side of things differently. And the conviction that McCullum and Stokes had throughout the series up until today, where they were talking about why they're preparing the way they are, playing amongst themselves, warm up games amongst themselves, against England Lions at Lilac Hill, and all those kind of things, and just rigorous, intense net sessions before the Gabba test. They were always speaking with such conviction about it, rightly or wrongly. But then today it seems like or at least McCullum has maybe finally acknowledged or admitted that, that approach probably hasn't helped. Now, you look at how England have played in the last 3 tests. There are a number of reasons why they've not done well. From technical stuff, driving on the up against the bouncing ball from kind of over number 1, to bowling plans not being disciplined, to selection things, like not picking a spinner you had hyped up for or built up for 2 years. There have been all sorts of issues where they've fallen short. Even Ben Stokes' captaincy, which he was lauded as a really kind of tactically astute captain coming into the series, but he's probably had his worst series as a captain, in these first 3 tests, and all of those things kind of go work together and leading aside to this scoreline. But the preparation stuff, it's hard to know how exactly how much that had a bearing on things, where it fits in the whole kind of matrix of what could have been done differently, what could have worked better for England. But as I say, I still think fundamentally, Australia are the stronger side, the better equipped side, and the side that are better at adapting. And I think all of those things is what ultimately leads to test sides having success. And I guess for future tours, maybe McCullum, if he still is in the role after the fifth test, maybe he will do things differently. But this whole topic has been really kind of interesting to listen to from afar, because I guess for a lot of us, we don't know, as I say, what goes into touring. We know it must be hard being away from home for so long in completely different conditions, and with how cramped the cricketing calendar is these days. Obviously it's going to be very tough to have completely optimal preparation. But in terms of this particular tour, it sounded like there were opportunities for England to play in certain games, or book out certain venues to try and give themselves the best chance of getting used to conditions and acclimatizing earlier. And it seems like they didn't take people up on that offer. And how much of a bearing, as I say, that's had on the results, I don't know. I still think it's only one part of it. But it's when you have such bad performances like this, and the potential for a whitewash is on. Everyone points the fingers to the captain and the coach. And a lot of this the way this team has played for 4 years has kind of come from the coach. I know baseball isn't an official term. It's not something they actively call themselves, within the team. But that, Baz being his nickname, this whole way of playing kind of falls on the coach's shoulders. And if he's making a lot of the decisions about, when to prepare, how to prepare, and tailoring things for certain players, then it doesn't reflect well on the coach. So moving forward, we'll have to see what they do differently, even between now and the Boxing Day test, what they do differently, if they do, and also I guess beyond, after the series, what they do. But moving ahead to Boxing Day, it's now just a case of, I guess, England trying to salvage some pride. It sounds like, from what Pat Cummins was saying, that there'll be some team changes on their part. Pat Cummins, it sounded like he wanted to just be ready to make sure that he participated in at least one game while the series was still live, and he's done that, had an impact. They've retained the Ashes. Nathan Lyon obviously is going to be ruled out, so that's another change they're going to have to make. Whether it's someone like Todd Murphy that comes in, we'll have to see. He obviously played in England 2 years ago, so he probably is the next kind of cab off the rank in terms of spin options. And batting, Stephen Smith will probably be available again. So it depends sort of how much they want to kind of relax a little bit now that they've won the series, or whether they will still go in with as full strength a side as they possibly can. I still think they have a couple of question marks. Cameron Green, and this is a topic I'll go into in a little bit more depth in the longer episode in a couple of days. But he's probably the guy that is not really. He's not clicking as much as the rest of the players. His numbers, batting and bowling, are kind of going in the wrong direction. With each kind of series, it doesn't look like, even though he's played for 5 years, that he's an experienced player. He still looks like he's still trying to figure things out. And whether he needs a bit of a break and chance to kind of go away and try and figure some stuff out and come back another time, I guess we'll find out. But Australia do have a few areas where they can still improve, and that's the thing that will probably frustrate England the most. Australia, I don't think in any of these tests have had their full strength side. You think of the fact that Josh Hazlewood hasn't played a single test, because he was ruled out. Pat Cummins only has come back in this test. He didn't play the first two. Stephen Smith missed this test. Nathan Lyon, he was, I guess, tactically left out of the Gabba test, but he arguably could have made a big difference there as well. He didn't play there, didn't really bowl at Perth, and here where he could have maybe helped wrap things up quicker on day 5 at Adelaide, but his injury kind of ruled him out. So, Australia still haven't played their full strength side, and they've cruised to victory. And depending on what side of the fence you are, you might say it's because England let themselves down a lot, which I do believe they did. I think they played into Australia's hands a lot in terms of how reckless and self-indulgent they were, but a lot of it is down to just Australia's players, especially in these conditions. Even the stand-ins, they just know these conditions so well. And as I say, a lot of them have been in these situations before. They just know how to get the job done, and they're not, deterred by the fact that you have to just stick to basic things and be methodical and systematic. They're more than happy to do that. And Australia, the fact that they're 3-0 up and potentially could win 5-0 without ever fielding a full strength side is, that doesn't look great for England. So, again, Australia, things can only get better, and England, I guess they're playing for pride now. They're playing for, it could go, I guess, one of two ways. England could look at these last 2 tests as looking to the future and trialing what could be a new combination. But even there, they don't have, other than Jacob Bethel, they don't have spare batters. And even Jacob Bethel, he hasn't been playing much cricket this year in general. But even on this tour, he played in the England Lions game, I think both of them. But in general, he hasn't played much cricket this year, and that's been a huge criticism of the management of Jacob Bethel this year. So, just the fact that he's there doesn't guarantee any kind of change in fortune, because he's going to be really kind of cold coming into the match if he does play. Shoaib Bashir, brought here as the frontline spinner, hasn't played a single game. The Ashes have gone now. Whether England will try and play him now, I don't know. But it just, if you're Shoaib Bashir and you get picked now, it just feels like almost like they had no other choice. So that's why they're picking me. It probably isn't a great feeling if you do get picked now. And yeah, you just look at their squad. They haven't really got many other options to choose from. The pace bowlers, they have some, but again, with all the injuries that they've gone through and the fact that some of them have played 3 tests in a row now, they might have to just play the same bowlers, or maybe just change up one. And it's not great. It's not great kind of player management, I think. What this England side have done with this squad in the series, and it's weird because, again, coming into the series, a lot was made of how settled this England side was, and they were. But I think they've been made to blink by Australia in this series, and seeing it all unravel in real time, different aspects of it. It's been quite kind of eye-opening if you're an England fan, but even just a Test cricket fan in general, to see something that they had so much conviction with for 4 years slowly begin to kind of fall apart. So we'll have to see how England go and how they pivot. But Australia, I guess, congratulations to Australia. They've won the series. Probably, as I say, the result most people are expecting. It's just a matter of, can they complete another 5-0 whitewash of England in Australia. We'll have to wait and see, but the way it's going and just the momentum and just how kind of low the England side looks at the moment, you wouldn't write off 5-0 at all. So we'll have to wait and see, but I hope you've enjoyed the last few videos. And as I say, the next full podcast episode will come out in a couple of days, where I'll get into a lot more of the issues that have been kind of brought up in this game in particular, but also just a big kind of zooming out and looking at the bigger picture. I'll be touching on some Virat Kohli, South Africa stuff, some West Indies things, and just a couple of other topics I have in mind. So until then, thanks for joining me. Like, comment, subscribe, share if you have enjoyed it, and I'll catch you soon.